Hello ladies and gentlemen, I am the Boss Fox, as always your voice from the other side, and our video tonight is going to be slightly more mature than previous ones. Not for children, later teenagers will do, adults definitely. The reason being, our discussion tonight is going to be about sensuality and carnality, and all the paradoxes that go with them. Now, my definition of these is by no means the same as perhaps the textbook definition. However, for the purpose of this video, we shall say that sensuality is a devotion to the pleasures of the senses, sight, hearing, touch, taste, and sound, and also the pleasures of the mind, whereas carnality is a devotion to the senses of taste, sight, touch, sound, and the senses of the body. And these days, ladies and gentlemen, it's a strange paradox we find ourselves in, because although the West is claimed to be decadent, you hear it all the time from religious, and moral conservatives, we'll go with that the West is decadent. The funny thing is, we are much more repressed these days in the far West, America being a prime example of this, than we are in other countries. Now, what do I mean by this? We use so much of our leisure time for quote-unquote pleasure, yes, but only to certain senses. Oh, sexuality is rampant within our entertainment industry, and our commercial industries, of course, but only paying mind to the pleasures of sight and sound. These stimulate a pleasure in the mind, yes, but they do not go for the deeper pleasures. Now, you have wit in a lot of performances these days, coupled with them, which helps, but does not satisfy the other senses. And of course, people will talk about, the excess of Western cuisine. Yes. I say, do you mind if I use your lighter for a moment? Mine isn't sparking. Sorry about that, folks. My pipe went out. Now, people hear about the excess of food that we take in. Yes. It's tasty, but it's one level so. Don't get me wrong, many of the dishes that are provided even by the cheapest fast foods give you a blending of flavors, yes, but they don't satisfy the taste as well as the long-standing hunger. Now, that's cheap, that's the thing. Americans pursue their pleasures, yes, but they pursue them wastefully. They're pursuing them for the fix, not for the pleasure. The same with smoking, as I've discussed in a previous video. People pursue smoking for the fix of it, not the pleasure. They pursue nicotine because it calms them, but not because they take true pleasure in the smoking, only to dissuade the uncomfortability and the aggravation that comes when they don't have their fix of nicotine. Now, these support pleasures of certain senses, but they leave out entirely other senses. Cheap thrills, cheap entertainments, cheap. There's no actual devotion to the pleasure. There's obsession with it, yes, but no devotion to it. Now, one of the few places that this takes a moral high ground, you might say, ironic as it is to say that in this topic, is in sexual pleasures. Yes, well, that's all well and good. Touch, sight, again, it takes on two of the senses, and if you get a particularly attentive partner you also get the pleasures of the audio with the nice moans and such. But here's the thing. Like so many things in this day and age, so many people, even in sexual pleasure, are looking for the quick fix. They don't take the time, they don't take the foreplay, they don't take the building up of their partner before endearing to truly make it an experience. It's all about the quick thrust, pump, and there we go. Now, here's the thing. We live in a world undreamed of. By our ancestors, by early man, by all that. But when it comes to actually pursuing our pleasures, looking at the ancient civilizations, Egyptian, Italian, Grecian, Roman, Persian, we find ourselves quite the amateurs. We have resources undreamed of in their times to feed our constant hunt for the pleasures of the mind and the pleasures of the senses. And yet the vast majority of the world goes so slapdash at it. And here's the thing. Sexual pleasures, it used to be this whole escapade. I mean, the build-up, the seduction, the slow build-up when you have that seduction, that building up of mutual pleasure through romance, foreplay, what have you, and building in a culmination up to the greater pleasure to come. What am I saying? I'm saying that to be a truly sensual lover, and a truly carnal lover, as in the old days, takes a certain amount of skill which I find lacking in most of this generation. All the seduction happens these days through sight, a little bit of sound, and then slam bang straight to touch. And it's all done so slapdash. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not talking about everybody, but I am talking about the vast majority of people. You see it all the time these days, one-night stands, quick fixes of sexual pleasure that are not sensual, that build up no real connection, no real building up, and take no real skill. It's all left to the hormonal. Now, to me, personally, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with a quick romp. But am I saying it's in the long run satisfying? No. Myself? The seduction, the entrancing of the partner is all part of the experience for me, part of the thrill. Now, I can flirt with someone with absolutely no danger in it. I enjoy this. I enjoy stimulating the blush, stimulating that tingling in them, if nothing else, through the audio, or the auditory senses. Paying compliments, building them up, making sure they get joy out of the experience, whether I take them to my bed or not. Am I old-fashioned in this? Absolutely. The flirting, the romance, all leading up, if I choose, and if they choose, to the carnal finish. Now, why is it that these encounters these days are incomplete? Because we're not focusing on both the sensual and the carnal. Everything these days is carnal. Now, don't get me wrong. Carnality is absolutely fun. The friction, the embrace of bodies, the wonderful feeling that is built up between everyone, that's great, if it's done right. If you lose yourself in the experience entirely to the point where you feel like you're coming back from heaven after the climax. Bully. Excellent. The problem is, though, that so many people focus on the end result that they negate or neglect everything building up to it. Now, when I take someone, an interest in someone, mind you, I'm flirting with them, yes. Stimulating their auditory senses, my words caressing like silk upon their ears, building them up to a state of ecstasy. And I'm old-fashioned. I'll do the dinner and a movie. Why? Because, well, maybe not the movie, but definitely dinner. The reason being, one, it gives you energy for the escapades after, and two, it stimulates the sense of taste. It lets one more part of the body in on this marvelous experience. I also like to do a bath. Why do I like to do a bath? Well, it stimulates not only touch and sight, but also the sense of smell. Various perfumes, what have you, various body washes, scented oils, all that stimulates the sense of smell. And then, of course, leading up to the eventual fun, well, we all know how much fun the sense of touch is. Oh yes, in point of fact, it's one of the main pleasures that most of humanity has, and yet denies itself for some reason. Human contact, physical human contact, is lower in this day and age than ever it has been before. Now, why is this? When did people start restricting themselves to a handshake? Even hugging these days, unless it's with absolutely intimate friends, family member, what have you, has gone completely down in the charts of happening. Why is this? I don't know. Humans have become much more, desensitized. They're not comfortable with human contact unless it's displaying an extreme intimacy. Now, having discussed all that is one thing, but there seems to be an entire battle these days with the moralists, be they religious or just moral, against sensuality and carnality. And you find this in many religions. No. You find this in many religions, chiefly among them the Judaic, Abrahamic religions, and also, surprisingly, in the Buddhists. We are taught by these institutions that the pleasures of the body, which sometimes lead to the pleasures of the mind, are unhealthy for us. Oh, God. And we find this more and more these days. Hello, Bug. Come on. Now, we find this more and more these days. They tell us that these senses and the gratifying them are the path to damnation, yada yada, out of the grace of the Lord, yada yada, the tired old arguments. Whereas in many religions, Zoroastrianism, Wicca, paganism, voodoo, you find pleasures to be central, sacred, especially among these, sexuality. It is a concept of sacred sexuality that you find in these religions that you don't find so much in the ones these days. Why is this? When did we become so morally tied, needing a reason to feel naughty about ourselves, that we declared war on the pleasures of sense and mind? Well, I can tell you when. Precisely. And those of you who are Christian on my channel, don't take offense to this. This is not a battle against you, this is simply fact. With the rise of the Christian Church, as a way to control the actions of their believers, war was declared on the senses of the flesh, on the senses of smell, taste. Look at the 7 deadly sins. Gluttony, lust, wrath.
I had to close all this now, dude.
3 out of the 7, right there. Highly tied. Oh, and sloth, can't forget sloth. 4 out of the 7, highly tied to the physical. Why did they do this? Well, it's simple. Yes, let's put a stop to the murders. Good there. Let's put a stop to the rapes. Good there. Let's put a stop to senselessly killing each other over nothing. Good there. 3 good points. However, when it got past good ideas and into straight-up rules, ironclad to be enforced by heavenly doctrine, well, if you've got nothing telling your followers they're naughty, why do they need some being to tell them how to be good? Well, you tell them that these things are naughty, these things are good, all of a sudden you have greater control over the masses. And we've seen this wielded with great precision by the Catholic Church, by many sects of the Muslim religion. And again, I'm not declaring war on any religion, I'm not even critiquing any religion. I'm simply stating, for the case of this video, where these things became naughty. Well, let's look at the Egyptians, let's look at the Greeks, let's look at the Romans, let's look at the Babylonians. All of them highly focused on physical pleasures. Now, the Greeks were the first to start going, okay, yes, indulge in the physical pleasures, but don't let them overwhelm your mind. Now here, we enter the sensual versus the carnal. Sensual pleasures can also stimulate the mind, whereas the carnal instincts stimulate only the body. Now the Greeks, and their logic, their marvelous processing of the mind, set up certain dictates for decorum that made sure that these two pleasures were in balance, keeping the pleasures of the mind equal and or greater than the pleasures of the body. And yet, as many historians will tell you, as far as the pleasures of the body, the Greeks were more than happy to indulge decadently. Look at Renaissance Europe, in particular Italy. All the art, culture, poetry, philosophy, and oh by God did those people party. Rich meals, fine wine, and sensual lewdness, the like of which the Catholic Church was hard-pressed to keep under control. I find this quite funny, that in that time the two got along, well, if not quite well. They weren't trying as hard to kill each other, as it were. Now, here's the thing I found, and it is not perhaps to be taken by everyone, but in life, life these days dictates one to work hard. Bully. Nothing wrong with hard work. But the point is, what's the point if you don't have a pleasure that makes all the work worthwhile? Now, some people have families, some people have depending on them, some people have goals to reach. Now, I find that keeping the sensual pleasures which stimulate the mind and the carnal pleasures which stimulate the body well fed in the midst of this stoic working, in the midst of this daily rush, is good for the mental health. It's even good for the body to a certain extent, so long as we don't go into absolute excess. Now, I know I'm probably going to get some critiques on this video from those who don't agree. I welcome that. I enjoy opinions. I enjoy feedback. But here's the thing. Tell me I'm wrong. If you've lived in the philosophy for a while, give it a try. Give it a try. Don't let it go to extremes, but give it a try and see if your life isn't better for it. Everyone has their quote-unquote vices, and the reason we have them is that they're a little bit of pleasure, a little bit of positive to our day, no matter how bad it's going, can make the difference in whether a day completely sucks or whether the day has redeemable qualities. Now, as I said, this isn't for everybody. This is just my opinion, and it's my channel. So of course it's going to be my opinion, but it's also something I've found through living. It's good for the mental health, so long as it's not taken to extremes, and it's good for the physical health, so long as it's not taken to extremes. And honestly, for all the pain that humanity endures in this world, for all the bitter that it endures, there must be sweet, there must be pleasure to keep the world in balance. Now, as I said, don't take it to extremes, but find that balance between carnality and sensuality, between physical and mental pleasures, and even between work and recreation. Finding that balance is essential to a good, healthy, and pleasant life. Now, as I said, I'm liable to have critics on this. I'd love to hear your feedback. I'd also love to hear suggestions for the next video. As always, this is the Boss Fox, your voice from the other side. Good luck, Godspeed, may the Force be with you, and good night.